liberty, and justice for all. Thank you. So we may see. City Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Rasko,
Here. Oh, sorry. Okay,
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
I'm here.
Councilmember Brisendine,
Here.
Councilmember Brummer,
Here.
Councilmember Hines,
Here.
Councilmember Poe.
Here.
We have a quorum. Do we have any public comments? None. No public comment. We'll move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda as a whole, or do we want to separate the items?
I move that we approve it as it stands, 1 through 6.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Brisendine,
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Poe.
Aye.
She gets me, okay,
Miss me. Good. Aye.
thank you.
Okay. The first item on our regular agenda is we'd like to welcome a wildlife biologist, Lake Hampton. He is with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and I understand that he has responded to calls from Woodcreek in recent incidents where there were some deer kills. So thank you for being here, and if you please, he has provided some handouts. So if any member of the audience would like a handout, it's a very useful one that tells you what to do in case of suspected. You just get to the mic. You can take it out if you wish.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do, he and I had talked over the phone, by email a few times, met out on a property, and talking about some carcasses that have been killed. And so we started talking about a little bit of the history of my interactions with the community here. I've been a biologist in the area for 14 years. I've worked fairly extensively throughout the area of Wimberley, Woodcreek, in addition, and the surrounding rural areas, on many issues relating to what we call kind of nuisance or risk animal species like coyotes, gray foxes, bobcats, and mountain lions. Mountain lions always kind of rise up to the top because of the perception of mountain lions and the perceived risk towards people. And so I wanted to bring a little bit of information on that for reference. And so I provide this sheet here that has a map on the front. And so this is a little bit of the history of Texas, but specifically Hays County, it shows on the map. The point is that these are confirmed occurrences of mountain lions that we have been able to document based on physical evidence, photographs that we were able to verify, a dead animal, a harvested animal. Basically, it goes through our process of being able to confirm. So this kind of shows you a snapshot of where mountain lion populations are in the state. Typically out in the Trans-Pecos area of the western part of the state. It does show that there's many counties across Texas that do have documented occurrences. That's indicated by the one on the counties. That means one mountain lion has been documented in that county. So based on records, when Texas Parks and Wildlife began keeping records on mountain lion occurrences in 1983, we have no documented mountain lion occurrences in Hays County. So just for for record there. So it kind of gives a little bit of background about how relative of a risk mountain lions are to us. In reality, even in areas of the state that have fairly high densities, like the Big Bend area of the Trans-Pecos, where there's lots of people out in those areas, hiking in those back remote areas, the interactions are still quite low. They're not zero, but they're very low. So the actual risk of having an encounter with a mountain lion is low in a populated area. What we do know from, or what we do understand from mountain lion biology in the state is that what we would expect would be the individuals that we confirm throughout the state, throughout the eastern part of the state and in central Texas, is that these are dispersing male individuals. Males tend to leave their territory where they're born in and disperse, and it's interesting information, interesting studies that have shown that male mountain lions have traversed thousands of miles, gone across states, looking for new territories, but they don't stop until they find a territory with a receptive female. So what we see in much across the state is that mountain lions, mostly males, almost exclusively males, disperse all across the state, meaning that there's really no breeding females except out in the western part of the state. So it's just, I wanted to give that a little bit of context there. Over my 14 years of working in the area, I've confirmed 2 mountain lions, one in Williamson County and one in Blanco County, but I have taken hundreds and hundreds of reports. And that's something that we do as an agency. We want to understand the biology, the distribution of these animals, and understand where they are moving. And so we have a process of that. And that's where if someone is concerned about they've seen a mountain lion, or they feel that they've seen a mountain lion or sign, we typically will go out to those areas, see if we can find any kind of documentation, scat, tracks, if they have pictures or video, anything that we can confirm to indicate that there was a mountain lion instead of it being a misidentified other species. But the second handout I want to bring up is just kind of this, I referred to it as the response flow chart. And this is just my input on how I often work with the public. When someone calls Texas Parks and Wildlife, they eventually end up getting in touch with me. This is how I typically respond. If it's in the upper left corner, if a resident has found a deer carcass, and that's kind of similar to the situations here, or they observed a sick deer, or they found some tracks and they're thinking, well, is this potentially a mountain lion? The appropriate contact there would be the resident would contact Texas Parks and Wildlife, and then headquarters would notify the local wildlife biologist. I would help come out and assess that. And people always have a concern here, and I think this is useful information, if there was ever a confirmed mountain lion in the community here, and it was thought of as being a risk to public safety, that is where Texas Parks and Wildlife will work directly with Texas Wildlife Services, which is it's a division of the USDA APHIS organization. So they would actually take primary responsibility for removal of that animal or assessing the risk and potential removal. So people don't always understand that connection. What happens if a mountain lion was. We've never, in my 14 years of working in Central Texas, that has never had to go to that step. The mountain lions that we've confirmed are always been just a very brief sighting or a hunter harvested animal. In the upper right, I mentioned this because this is often the case. People would just have concern about maybe attack, like a coyote attacked a deer, a dog, a gray fox is coming too close to their house and maybe barking at them. If there is ever a perceived emergency, a direct public emergency, Parks and Wildlife can be kind of on the back burner. You would address those residents by saying, contact your local sheriff's office or a game warden, Texas Parks and Wildlife game warden. That's not the time for a biologist like me to come out and assess the site and determine whether educational information is appropriate. That's a public safety concern. The other type of broad category of calls that I get from this area is just about sick animals and potentially animals that may have signs of like distemper or rabies. In those cases, those people will contact a Hays County Animal Control Officer through the Sheriff's Office. Texas Parks and Wildlife does not do nuisance animal control or removal. So this was, I just wanted to show just kind of how I typically respond to these kind of calls. And then the last sheet, I just brought some information about urban coyotes. This is probably the most common issue, and this is about concerns, but also the most common type of interactions that residents will have with wildlife. It's coyotes coming up too close. And this happens to be probably the most common issues with deer carcasses. Over and over again, when we examine deer carcasses, get measurements off the bite marks, look around the site, find tracks, and then look at the way the animal was either taken down through predation or scavenged on, coyotes are almost always the culprit. If not the primary cause of death, at least through scavenging. So with this, there is some information about how to utilize scare tactics. The main thing is that with coyotes, as they come into urban areas, it's best that each individual resident learns the approaches to take to make those animals feel uncomfortable in that location. Coyotes do not need to be comfortable in our urban or residential environments. They need to know how to have a respectful fear. But that's the basic information, and then I wanted to just open it up if there's any questions specifically for me.
I would like to, those in the audience, if you have any questions. Here, Councilmember Foley has a question.
Okay, just a quick question. There's some discussion about animals that are sick or diseased. I know there are certain kind of animals that if you see them during the day, they're probably sick. I mean, like possums. What other kind of animals, if you see during the day, should you be concerned about possibly being sick?
Yeah, so generally skunks are typically much more distinctly nocturnal in their behavior, active during the nighttime. You see them wandering around in the daytime. That's typically a pretty good sign that there's something going on. Many other species like gray foxes are very active during the daytime or nighttime, but they're very susceptible to rabies and distemper and will often interact with domestic pets in the landscape. But that is kind of a good thing to think about, but that's, I would say, most likely associated with skunks, just specifically time. But anytime a wild animal appears to be just kind of uninterested in your presence, and it just kind of ignores you, and it just kind of walks around and maybe looks dazed or confused or not up to health, that would be a concern for potential rabies concern.
Thank you.
Councilmember Plummer, do you have a question?
Yeah. This is actually a little bit off what you're doing, but I think it applies to you. Baby deer are often born and then the moms wander off to go feed, and the public doesn't always know what's going on. They see a baby deer, and then could you just give them some advice of what they should do?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. And we actually, because we address this on such a frequent basis, that come up this time of year, in the last number of years, our different divisions, including the Hill Country District, the Wildlife Division that I'm in, we always put out little informational blurbs on our Facebook page, and that's something that I could share with y'all so that y'all can at least link to that if y'all use Facebook. It describes the fact that, you know, most fawns that are left in a setting have not been abandoned. You know, that's people's concern. You know, there's not a mother around. Well, that's kind of the evolutionary adaptation of white-tailed deer and their fawns. That's why they're spotted and the coloration. They sit still. You can walk directly on them, and they'll try to ignore you and stay hidden unless you're fixing to step right on them. So they're adapted where the mother goes off and feeds, maybe for much of the day, comes back, finds the fawn and nurses, and they may spend the night there in that location, but the next day it's going to look like the fawn has been abandoned. If the fawn is in the same spot for multiple days and you see no sign of a doe, and it looks like the fawn is getting more and more distressed, maybe coming up to people, then that's where the individual landowner, individual resident still doesn't really need to get directly involved, but we do have, Texas Parks and Wildlife does provide a list of wildlife rehabilitators for the area. And that's always a good approach, is at least just consult with a rehabilitator, and they can give you some inputs of things to watch. It may not have to do anything, but they'll kind of give you some ideas. But yeah, most of those fawns should never be messed with. That's their approach to staying hidden away from predators.
If you don't mind, Mr. Rollins is the chair of our parks board.
Yes.
Yeah, but this isn't part of
This
the
is,
question.
it's not,
No,
okay.
it's-
Then you can,
I mean,
okay.
I used to live in Colorado, and there was a book that I read called Beasts in the Garden. Read that?
Yeah, it's great.
And it talked about how the urban development and people feeding the, I guess, elk that were in their community, augmented community, they had huge disproportionate concentrations of one of the natural foodstuffs of the mountain lions moved into their city streets and areas. And it caused the mountain lions to habituate to humans and discover that humans really aren't as serious as they thought. And I'm just a little concerned about the number of deer we have focused in a very small city that have been kept here by a lot of people feeding them. Now, if I was a mountain lion, this is what I would do. So I don't know.
Yeah, and that's an excellent book, and our agency's actually taken that book to heart in terms of the lessons learned by the Colorado Division of Wildlife in terms of not necessarily understanding that mountain lions were starting to move into their urban areas and not really addressing it until actually a little bit late on some occasions. In both of the handouts, the coyotes and the mountain lions, it's specifically stating that, you know, the prey items, specifically mountain lion, but also for coyotes, deer are up at the top. And we have abundant deer in these areas, these are urban residential areas. And we specifically say, don't feed deer. Don't feed other wildlife as well. You know, make that a point. That's, we have large populations of acclimated deer to human residences, and that does draw in a potential interaction. So we always recommend that people don't feed. Sure.
You have these, excuse the term, lone wolf males foraging out through the state. They're looking for mates, but is it possible once they find a place that's just got really good eating, they hang around for a while?
Sure. Yeah, that's what we think is that because of the dispersal, instead of just staying in a particular location, a particular home range, because they're dispersing, they are probably they probably have a higher potential for interactions like car crashes. You know, being hit by cars. That's where actually a lot of these occurrences in the northeastern part of the state and northern part of the state are from mountain lions that are found dead that have been hit by a car. And so they do disperse. But if they don't get hit, then yeah, they're just floating around the landscape, and they could do that for their entire life. So 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
So I guess my question to you, do you think we have enough?
That's a great question. I assume, I work on the assumption that we do. There's no reason that we shouldn't. And so I kind of, they're very difficult to actually document. And that's actually a good, there's 2 parts of that. It seems kind of like we would want to be able to document them if they're here, but because they typically do not want to be around humans, they're very secretive and they actively stay away from humans. That's a good thing. But they probably are, I assume that they are. But documenting them is difficult. And that's where we, we do take seriously the reports when residents call in and say, we think we have, something, a sign of mountain lion carcass. I want to understand what's going on. What is killing those deer? What are these tracks that someone's seeing? I took a picture of something. What is this? Could it be a mountain lion? So we do take those seriously, but many of them are not what people think.
Maureen has a question.
What would you recommend if you come upon a coyote on the trail? Like particularly if it's dark?
What on the
If
trail?
a coyote.
A coyote. Yeah. So any of these animals, even foxes, but coyotes, mountain lions. There are some good information on the back of the mountain lion handout about specifically if you happen to be in an area, mountain lion comes up to you. Basically, predator species, they tend to react on the prey reaction. So if the prey looks scared and kind of darts, that triggers their prey instinct. The main thing is when we see these things out on a trail, we need to try to have these ideas in mind to not panic. Remember that you're bigger, to remember that most people can scare off both mountain lions and coyotes. Make yourself big. If you have a stick with you, if there's kids with you, go ahead and pick them up if they're small kids. Walk in groups, walk with someone, things like that. But yeah, make loud noises, those kinds of things.
Member Hines here.
So we had a couple cases of rabies here a few months ago, and they were confirmed. And then we just kind of stopped hearing about it. And so I was curious if you know anything about that procedure. When can the community kind of feel like we're safe again, or that's been handled? What's the protocol on that?
Right. Yeah. So those are more kind of epidemiological questions. There are, so the folks that generally track that at kind of the local scale for your local community or county or municipality are those more local entities. So in reality for Hays County, the Hays County Animal Control should be tracking that and letting people know, are there still cases or have they dropped off in terms of educational materials as well. I have gotten some feedback from residents that, well, the time frame or perhaps the animal control is not prioritizing this particular case. That's where you still just have to work with your local jurisdiction on that. And that, in my understanding for Hays County, it's the Hays County Animal Control. Through the sheriff's office.
Well, on behalf of council and personally, I do want to thank you for coming to us this evening and also for your responsiveness in the cases that we have had. And it is an issue here. I understand the feeding of the deer and they're so cute, and people come in and start feeding them, and creates a problem. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, now we go to item number 8, and this is an item by Councilmember Pulley. Discussion and possible action on appointing Vicky Alvord. I think it's a V there instead of an F. Mike Stewart, Joe Branco, and Chris and Ariel Stockdale as members of the City of Woodcreek Traffic Task Force with Mr. Pulley as the council liaison, and a report on the status of the Hayes County Shared Traffic Patrols. Mr. Pulley?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. What I'm going to do here is first I'm going to make a motion to appoint members to the committee, and then I'm going to give a report. So first of all, in terms of appointing folks, the 4 members that have stepped up and agreed to be part of the task force, Mike Stewart, Vicky Alford, Joe Branco, Chris and Ariel Stockdale. Those are the 4 good folks. They are scattered, not scattered, but they live throughout the neighborhoods. We have a good geographical representation, and they're all good folks, qualified. Mike Stewart is here. Mike, would you stand up, please, sir, or wave? Yeah. Mike lives on Woodcreek Drive, and I regard him as a good friend because I walk by his house a lot and we talk. So I would move to accept those folks as members of the task force, and myself as the liaison, city council liaison to the task force.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second to, is there any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Councilmember Pulley,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine, Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Grummer.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines.
Aye.
Do you have to report?
Yes, I do. Motion carries.
You ready?
Okay. And
Motion
again,
carries.
okay, Mike, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to give a quick report of what we've been doing. If you have any comment, feel free to pitch in. We had our initial organizational meeting. That was with the first time we deployed an officer. We got ourselves organized, got the officer deployed. We have set up weekly enforcement patrols that are going out at various times during the week. Each officer is met by a member of the community before their shift starts so that we can kind of orient the officer to the neighborhood, tell him what our issues are, what our priorities are before he goes out to the neighborhood. We have completed or will complete our second month of those patrols. Some of the shifts are reporting 6 to 8 stops. Some of the shifts really didn't report at all. So what we did is Vicky Alford specifically created a report form, and that's the first item in your handout. I've taken that and tweaked it a little bit and put it in a Word format, but that's what we'll be handing the officers every time they go out, so they have an opportunity to keep track of what they're doing. Also, it's kind of a report card to make sure they didn't go and fall asleep or something. So we don't want them to come back with it blank, hopefully. The second page in your package is an example from April 14 of what the report looks like. This officer made 6 stops, 2 for speeding, 2 for disregarding a stop sign. These are all on Woodcreek Drive. And whatever reason, he focused on Woodcreek Drive that day, which is fine. Other days, they focused on different parts of the city. And again, we give them our priorities and then just sort of turn them loose because they're the professionals and they know what to do. We're going to try and keep that information in a database. Vicky is volunteered to keep track of this in an Excel spreadsheet so that we can transfer that to the city, and then we have that data is stored, and we can go and try to take a look at it and generate information, generate see what kind of results that we're getting out of our efforts. The last page in the packet that I handed you is something that came from a citizen, Kathy Franklin. It's an article that's called, "So What Can You Do to Stop Speeding in Your Neighborhood?" Some of you may have seen it before. I took an excerpt of it. Generally, they focus on what I've highlighted there is, educate your residents with community awareness. I know, Deborah, you've talked about a community awareness program already. That's part of it. Enhanced enforcement, that's what we're kind of working on. Take a look at engineering devices. in terms of, maybe how we can restripe or do something to try to bring awareness to get folks to understand this is a neighborhood, not a highway. Lastly, community involvement is important, and that's where this committee is come into play, and it's been so important. So that's my report. I'm still, we're still working. It's not been remotely fixed, but at least we're taking baby steps toward getting something done. I would entertain any comments, suggestions, anything regarding the times that we're deploying these folks. They're generally right now 7 in the morning to 11, or in the evening 3 to 7. That may change to 2 to 6. We're just kind of working with that. So any ideas on days, times, or the format of the report, or anything else, I'm happy to listen to, entertain now, or at any time.
Councilman?
I actually have questions that are back yet. The first question is relating to the areas of the city. I understand that they're going to be focused on a specific area of the city, but are they still touring at all those days?
Right. What we do, the committee member meets the officer and hands them a map. The main roads, Woodcreek, Brook Meadow, Augusta, Brook Hollow, Champion Circle, those are highlighted, but he's asked to set up, in certain places, if he likes, he's given some options to set up, but basically we want him ranging through the neighborhood as well. So it's a combination, set up, run radar, but also through the neighborhood.
Thank you. The next question is, if citizens see something in their area, like, my area, I've been noticing a lot of speeding, and it's not necessarily maybe off the beaten path. Who do they contact?
They can contact either city staff, or they can contact you, or they can contact me. Just get that word to us, and then to the committee. Next time we meet with an officer, we'll say, we've got an issue, or we've had an issue up on XYZ Street. Why don't you spend some time up there?
And so who would we contact?
You can contact me, if you like. If you contact staff, they'll contact me. Ultimately, I think since I'm council liaison, I think it's all right to just call me and say, have an issue, I'll pass it on to the committee.
Any further questions from council?
One last comment. We're going to be asking staff, I guess, to send out a blast email or text to see if people will volunteer for their driveways to be, used occasionally, for an officer to set up. And I think some folks have done that already, and it helps them so they don't have to go and find a vacant lot somewhere. So that's coming next, I believe.
Can we add your email address to the bottom of that?
Sure. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I do want to thank Mr. Stewart for volunteering, and for those who also volunteer with him. This is something that is very much an issue with our citizens. And I happened to drive by when he was writing the sheriff at someone, and the cherry lights were on, and he was writing whether it was a citation or a warning, but he was taking care of business with it. Thank you, Councilmember Pulley. And we go now to the next item. Is our item on, is the item number 9. And this is for us, this is an item submitted by Mayor Vasco. He is a discussion and take appropriate action on a proclamation from the city of Woodcreek to support the International Lights Out effort to reduce hazards to migrating birds. I think in the last few days, weeks, there have been quite a bit of conversation on social media as well as in the regular media about the migration of birds. So if I may, for those who don't have a copy, I try to read this as quickly as possible. It's a proclamation from the city of Woodcreek. Whereas Lights Out Texas is a statewide initiative that aims to raise awareness of the risk light pollution poses to birds, and to ask businesses, residents, and governments to turn off non-essential lights at night in the city of Woodcreek during bird migration from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the spring and fall bird migration periods of March 1st through June 15th and August 15th through November 30th of each year. And whereas the city of Woodcreek is joining an international lights out effort by proposing and implementing a simple solution that dramatically reduces hazards to migrating birds, allowing them to safely proceed with their journeys during critical migration periods. And whereas the initiative is led by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Texan by Nature, which was founded by former First Lady Laura Bush, and is a collaborative effort supported by numerous organizations and communities throughout the county. And whereas more than 1 billion birds died in collisions with buildings, including our single-story buildings with lights that attract and disorient migrating birds in the United States annually. And whereas each year nearly 2 billion birds travel through the state of Texas, mostly at night. This number represents between a quarter and a third of all birds migrating throughout the United States. And whereas the extensive light pollution from our non-shielded rural and urban lights, both residential and commercial, including string and pole lights, combined with the enormous bird migration, creates a particularly hazardous environment. And whereas birds are important to the Texas economy, Texas A&M found that nature tourism, which is dominated by bird watching, contributes $300 million to the economy. And whereas birds also help control the population of pest insects, enhancing agricultural production, and are important pollinators for many flowering plants. And whereas turning out non-essential lights also provides additional benefits, such as reducing electricity consumption, saving money, and reducing pollution associated with power production. And whereas the Lights Out program supports other local activities such as parks and open spaces, Hayes County Master Naturalist Chapter, the International Dark Sky Community Designations, adult and junior birding clubs, Hayes County Friends Night Sky, that will help enhance nature tourism benefiting our local economy. And whereas the city of Woodcreek has acknowledged the importance of the night sky by implementing progressive lighting ordinances and is recognized by the IDA, and whereas birds are essential to the ecology of our planet, provide ecosystem services, act as benchmarks for environmental health, increase livability, and connect people of all ages and abilities to the natural world. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Jeff Rusco, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of Woodcreek, March through June 15, 2022, and August 15 through November 2022, shall hereafter be known as Lights Out for Bird Safety Months in the city of Woodcreek, Texas. 2, community members, business owners, and government officials are encouraged to pledge, stating they will extinguish exterior lights during the specified time frame during Lights Out for Bird Safety Migratory Months. Signed by Jeff Roscoe, Woodcreek Mayor. I
would move that we accept the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the resolution by Mayor Roscoe. Is there any discussion? Not that I'm aware of. It is something that is being just throughout Texas and the country. And quite a few of the groups that I work with, like Master Naturalists and bird lovers like me, are very much in favor of this. I have not heard anything negative. This is in addition to dark skies, and I believe that, and Brenton may correct me, that it has already, similar proclamation has been adopted by some of the cities in Hayes County and the county.
And we will still enforce the dark night skies ordinances that is complaint driven. And so, usually the neighbors work out. This has no meat. No enforcement.
Okay. All right. Please.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine, Councilmember Brummer.
Motion carries. Item number 10 is the continuation of an agreement with the Capital Area Texas Regional Advisory Council. And I asked the city manager if there was any financial impact on the city, any cost, other than the participation of staff.
And if there, we've been a participating agency, but we've never been billed anything. But on page 41 or on there's 85, 1552, but it does say that they could pass on something. Because they match 10%, so for, they, $1 for each $10 of federal funds. They have never passed on costs.
And this is a program that is under the responsibility of the Texas Department of Health Services. And it's part of the overall emergency management program for the state to ensure that there's hospital preparedness in case of an emergency. And one of the items that we have to do two things. Number one, we have to vote on continuing or renewing the agreement. And number two, designating a point of contact for notification in the event of an emergency. And in this, I think to date, it has been the city manager. So the item before us, I will entertain a motion on the continuation of the 2-year agreement with the Capital Area of Texas Regional Advisory Council and having the city manager as a representative for the city of Woodcreek.
So moved.
Is there a second?
She needed it first, so I moved. So we need a second.
Okay, any discussion?
I had some questions.
Good.
So, what responsibility does this create for Woodcreek staff or?
Well, basically, we can sit on the board, and there's 2 options in there, that we wish to continue to participate in the regional efforts and accept the same federal program fund equipment and supplies available. If we don't choose that, then we have to show we have an inventory that meets their requirements. What else?
An inventory.
Could be. If, because in that one section, it states that they can't pass on if they cannot carry enough to meet with 10%.
From the emergency preparedness, in case of an emergency, and there's a declaration, there will be a declaration of emergency from the governor, which would entitle the state of Texas to apply for federal funding, and then local communities that are affected may also apply for both state and or federal funds. So in case of an emergency that require us to spend funds, there will most likely be a mechanism to recoup at a minimum 75% of our expenditures. So-
How long have we been participating in this?
Well, before I was here, like I said, every year, 2 years.
Is it fairly typical, I mean, for a municipality to participate? Okay.
Yes, it's usually the hospital entities but they also want the communities to participate. Oh, they ask them to participate. So any further discussion? Please call for the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley,
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. We go to item 11. Item 11 is discussion and take appropriate action on a request from the Parks and Recreation Board authorizing a maximum expenditure of $60,000 to begin work on park projects as presented in the Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee grant application. In the packet, you have quite a bit of documentation. You have the minutes of the Parks and Recreation Board where this item was discussed and and to refer to council. And then there's also information on the type of installations and equipment. And the recommendation that is the Parks Recreation Boards is requesting that we approve the recommendation to begin limited work using funds allocated for parks. I entertain a motion in the second so we can begin discussion.
So moved.
I move that we approve this for discussion purposes right now, that we move into discussion.
So we have a move.
If
we
you're
have a-
amending, I'll accept the amendment.
Okay, you accept the amendment. We have a motion, has been amended, amendment is accepted. I stay a second. All right, the discussion is open.
Nah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I watched the meeting, and I'm very much in favor of supporting our parks, and I'm very much in favor of beginning the process to support parks. And I am concerned about receiving the POSAC grant or a portion of it, or how that will play out, or how long that could take. So I do want to entertain the idea of getting some of the process moving. I do, however, have reservations with approving the expenditures right now, given the discussion that I saw, and because I have further questions or requests of parks. So number one being that they get new quotes. The cost of materials has changed since those initial quotes were generated, and I'm concerned about the feasibility of some of these projects, and I think that we should maybe consider readdressing them or seeking local builders for some of these items versus a kind of a kit that you buy. They can be more expensive, and then you also have the added cost of assembly. And so I would encourage seeking local builders. Next, I would like parks to define their top priorities, especially given that POSAC has not put us in tier 1 or 2. There is the possibility that we might still receive some funds, but unlikely the full amount we requested, or maybe so. But we're just kind of, we've got that 60,000 dedicated, but we might not get it all. So I want to be careful about how we spend any of this money to start. So I would like the parks to kind of identify their priorities concretely, get new quotes on those items specifically. The gazebo is attractive, but it is not something to do, and that concerns me. I believe that if we did move forward with the gazebo, I'd like to see some changes in that design, specifically to add seating around the edges to give people a way to use it. And I would also like to see the concrete pad underneath it removed in order to protect groundwater, surface water flow, impervious coverage, and that. Additionally, I would like to remind everyone that our comprehensive plan survey results were resoundingly in favor of a playscape in particular, and I would like the Parks Department to focus on achieving a portion of the playscape or reducing the playscape size and features to be able to consider spending the full $60,000 on that and installing our playscape for our community. I don't know if y'all saw recently on social media, there was another outcry for certain things in the community, and once again playscape was up there along with a pool. We can't pay for a pool with $60,000, but we can consider a playscape. And I'll reiterate the concept of focusing on things to do, and because parks are a great place to visit, but if you have family and you have kids and you're going there for something to do, for the kids to do, to explore, to engage in something. And then the last thing is I would ask that they focus on accessibility and the usability of our parks, meaning our parking spaces need to be improved upon and beefed up a little bit. We need to consider bathrooms. And I don't mean installing actual bathrooms. I'm talking about an attractive porta potty possibly. We also should probably consider a source of water. These are all things that I'd very much like to see the Parks Department kind of addressing in future plans. And so personally, I would prefer they do these things or accomplish some of these goals I just outlined, and then I'd be more inclined to approve the expenditures right now.
Councilmember Palmer?
A lot of my thoughts you addressed. Yeah, I was interested in the idea of having an actual design for specifically Creekside, because in the packet, it's a picture of a playscape, and then there's the grounds, but it's not showing how the two are being put together. You know, like a little schematic of some kind. I understand that there's going to be a big tree that needs to come down, and it's already there. It's already came down. But I've done some research regarding deep research regarding playgrounds and playground theories, and naturalistic. In the last 10 years, naturalistic playgrounds tend to be the overwhelming success stories for studies. And I'm not saying replace what we already have. I'm saying in addition to, we have a downed tree already in existence. There's a chance to possibly use that trunk on its side, turn it into a crawling feature of some sort. We already have it. Already the woods right there. All we do is just kind of knock it down and kind of clean out the edges and get rid of all sharp edges. That would be an interesting consideration for parks to include in their plan, as well as I'd like to have a plan that includes the trees that are there already, mapped out, and then the trees that they're going to have trees in order to accommodate this. I'm kind of like Deborah, or Councilmember Hopkins. I don't feel like I'm ready to pull the trigger yet because we don't have an actual design. I actually already am putting something on the next agenda on the list, which would be much more visual, because I'm a visual person, where I've gone through all the playground stuff. So, look forward to that.
Councilmember Pulley, do you have any comments?
I guess the only comments I would have is, and we may want to hear from Pat a little bit, but in new quotes, it's probably not a bad idea with the cost of materials are dramatically increased. Local builders, I think we need to go with whoever can do the job for the, for the right price, and that may or may not be a local person. Bathroom, I don't know if we can, I'm not sure if that's feasible to have a bathroom set up there. Certainly, I don't want a porta potty in a park. I think we're gonna have to rely on going back home or something if someone has to use a restroom. Playscape for kids, I think that's certainly, that was expressed in the survey that we looked at. I don't think it should be solely a playscape, but anyway, those are my thoughts. Do we want to hear from Pat or?
Okay, Councilmember Brisendale?
And I think it's early work on at least $60,000. I realize that the word has been spread that the commissioner has ready us to go ahead and put that money in it. We don't have to do anything that time. And I feel like it's a contingency. And early release that kind of money.
I made sure I double check with both the mayor and council that by presiding in his absence, I still retain my ability to comment on an item, and I do. I think that I do not want to repeat what has been said. I think that Councilmember Hines covered many of my concerns, and then combined with what Councilmember Grummert and Councilman Brisendine about the funds. I do understand that by very recently, a lot of discussion on social media about the amenities that our citizens want to see. And of course, there's the swimming pool, which is, I would love to have it, but it's one of those things that we realize may be out of our reach. But there's also, both from the survey, the comprehensive plan survey, and from the comments and the changes that we continue to see in our population, with families with children moving into our area. And as houses turn over, I think that, I mean, I love the gazebo idea, you know, all those old movies with people enjoying themselves with the bands and the gazebos are very romantic. But I think that we have to look at what the funds we have available. We also have to look at the effect on the citizens who live around the triangle and traffic on Wood Creek Drive, which is an issue. So I do agree that it's, in my opinion, this is too early for us. And I think more work needs to be done by the Parks Board and for council to proceed. Those are my comments. So we had a motion to discuss. We have motion to discussion. We have discussed it. What are the wishes of council on this item?
Mayor? I move that we request Parks Board seek new quotes, create a priority list for projects to achieve if POSAC grants don't come through, and that they kind of take into consideration some of these things we've said today, and that they receive something in writing from Commissioner Lonshell, or the POSAC grant committee, stating that any money we spend now can be credited to that application. And I would like for Parks to then come back to us. So this is not a no, this is we want more info.
We consider that a motion.
I
Do you need a
second.
second? Do you second, Mr. Romer?
I did.
Mr. Floyd, discussion?
Yes, and I want to, first of all, commend Parks for the work. Obviously, done a lot of good, hard work. We just, I think there's some questions we'd like you to work on, particularly, I think with the county, you know, where that stands, the materials, you know, situation and whatnot, but I'm behind you. You know, we just would like a little more information, but don't stop, you know, I mean, please keep working. And I just want to make sure you have adequate instruction, I guess, from us going forward.
Councilmember Sindani? Thank you.
If I may, I have a question for
Please.
Brendan. So I understand that we have to kind of go through a catalog for such things like a playscape, correct? Could you explain a little bit about that
No,
process?
basically, if they are, there's two purchasing agencies out there, and my board and there's state agents, that if you just look at what you want, you already need to buy that bid, because it's already been bid out. And so, there's several companies out there that are buying things, but the thing is, you just gotta find out what you want, if they can do that without bid.
But they're not necessarily local, it's a bigger.
If it's local, then you would have to draw up the specs, and
Well, I
on
mean-
what you're doing.
But I'm kind of call it a catalog, I guess.
Yeah.
Game time, I went all over that
Okay,
website.
right.
They're not necessarily categorized by locality in this location. that we're talking
No, because game time is late point number.
about. That's fine.
And so you have sales rep. And
They
game
could be-
times in San Antonio. It could be, and there's other ones too, they might be in Austin, they might be in Houston. And so it's not local because they have their reach.
And I just wanted to, this is a different topic. I wanted to, once again, appreciate the Parks Board for their thoughtfulness regarding the design. They chose one that's called In the Timber series, which is again naturalistic, which I think is really good. Good choices, and I also appreciate that there are other mechanisms with game time where they can adjust colors to make it even more harmonious if you wish. I know a lot of the comments that were made with the previous playground design was about aesthetics. They wanted it to blend in, not be seen as much. And I think there's a good opportunity there. And I think Timberline series in particular was a good choice.
I think you had a question.
No, it's just a comment along those same lines. I wanted to clarify, when I talk about local builders, I'm not talking about the items that need to be purchased in a kit, like a playscape. I'm talking more about like the gazebos or those kind of items. But the playscape itself, what's really cool about all of these items, because I also kind of looked into them for my own purposes. We own a playscape at our home, but you can purchase them in portions. So we could install a smaller playscape now, and then if we wanted to expand on it in the future, they're like widgets almost. They interlock and you just kind of add on as funds become available, or say we do get the POSAC grant and we're like, great, we can afford more than just a swing set now. So it is possible, but I do want to go back to that concept of we do lack the designs of, okay, we have this design, we have a park, how are we putting the two together? And I would like to see that.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there a need to restate, or are we ready for the vote? Okay, will you,
Councilmember Brummer,
Repeat the motion.
ever move that the Parks Board obtain new quotes, make a priority list if the POSAC grants don't go through, obtain in writing a letter from Lon Shell that the money spent now, how it can be used, and that Parks returns with a recommendation to the City Council.
May I make a amendment?
is there a motion?
I'm making the amendment for all of council. The wording that wasn't addressed was a plan for a plan, because the wording was very specific to a plan if the POSAC grant doesn't go through, where I think we should also include a plan, regardless of
Okay.
whether it goes through or not. Like, those could be two different design plans. You want to read it again? Make sure I heard it correctly?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. To move that the Parks Board obtain new quotes, they make a priority list if the POSAC grant does not go through, a letter from Lon Shell, how the money can be spent now, and that the parks make a recommendation to the City Council.
I'm just going to discuss the amendment for just a second. The priority list to me has to do specifically with the POSAC grant not going through, if it didn't, right? Like, I don't want to jinx us. Hopefully we get some money, whatever amount, it would be amazing. Our community will definitely put it to good use. I think they have a plan for if the money goes through already. That's what we have in the packet.
I guess that's what I meant by physical design. When I'm saying
Oh,
plan,
the
I meant
playground
like,
plan either way.
because we have a picture of a playground and I don't see it on location.
Why don't we make a second motion? Okay.
But
Pat, did you have a comment? Are you saying there is something we missed?
Comments that I can put on
You want to make a? Well,
Okay, we have a motion.
we have a motion,
and
we
then
have
you-
a second,
then
and
you
I
vote.
understand, I understand I understand that we all probably frustrated by the delays.
Pat, would you come to the microphone? Is it okay if he's?
You can come to speak, you sure?
Yeah, just basically a number of the things that you were calling for in the motion, things that you wanted done, and I guess, somehow message that we, so as far as new bids, we've got the bids on the item. As far as the plan for the quick side, we did have that.
I don't I
See,
guess
none
that's
of
the
that's in
problem.
our packet.
It's not-
What is in the packet is the original application proposal. It shows playground equipment going in, but it does not show exactly what trees would be.
Well,
Well,
at one point, we did show exactly where we would want to put it. I tried to see this survey for the Ohio area. For whatever reason, that wasn't achieved.
May I ask a question? What was the reason for it not being achievable? Do you need us to?
I don't know, it was some procedural, something that you can do this, before you can do this.
Since the motion is to send it back to Parks.
Yeah.
Bring it back. Rather
We
than.
can bring you on.
I do want to mention, if I may, I know that you have done a lot of work, and I was not in person at your meeting, but I did watch the meeting, and I heard your discussion on why the decision was made to bring this to council. And I won't speak for Councilmember Grummer, I'll let him do it, but when I hear what he has to say and what Councilmember Hines has to say, I understand that is something different than what you have brought to us. Is like, what if, and options. So I don't want to speak for anyone else, so if you may want to, if either one of you want to clarify.
So I second Councilmember Grummer's amendment to include a plan for the placement of a playscape, including maybe an initial phase, a smaller version, and then maybe, 2 future phases, a second and a third.
Is that, I think that's what they're asking.
That's fine, if you can get pretty complicated as far as the cost. FaceTime and, we did get in writing, email from one that I asked the question. That would be applied.
It depends on how you.
I'm a little.
So that's great. Just
I
have
think
it
that-
submitted to
I
us.
think that what he said needs to be, I do not feel as comfortable with his response as I would like to be. I think that the response has to be more specific, because one of the things, and I did watch your, one of the things I heard during your meeting when I was watching is, what if we take this money and the grant is awarded at a later date, and we have spent this money, which was budgeted as a match. And I remember that discussion, including that the possibility, this was your discussion with your board members, the possibility of the grant being smaller because we didn't have the amount to match, or the possibility that being that what we purchased would be accepted as in-kind match instead of cash. And those are things that we are not in a position to make that determination, but if we need to know. I read the term and not the terms of the grant, and I did not see an in-kind option. Now, if one is available, that's a clarification that we should seek from those who are, have the responsibility for awarding the grant. So I did listen to what you have to say very carefully, and I did read what he had to respond, and I'm not comfortable on behalf of the city with his response.
I just will say, he did indicate that we, that he felt very positive about us.
Yeah, I mean,
Somebody says.
Okay.
And I really appreciate all of your comments and I think your excellent comments. I don't really disagree with the other. I just see my job.
and
So the mechanism of the municipality is to be careful, studious, which doesn't always get done. So I am trying to be advocate for not having analysis paralysis. And that's enough.
good. And thank you, Pat, very much. And this is in no way, please understand that we respect what you're doing and we appreciate your diligence and that of the members of your board.
Now we need to vote.
Are you ready?
Yeah,
Ready
call
for-
to vote.
Go for
Okay,
the
so
vote.
we're
ready for
voting on the
question.
amendment. We're voting on the amendment. Councilmember Grummer,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine, Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Unanimous
we'll
vote?
vote on the motion.
Motion?
We're going to vote on the motion.
Okay.
Councilmember Grummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine, Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley.
Okay, clarify. We
Aye.
have two votes,
We voted on
one
the
for the amendment,
amendment
to
and
agree
one
the
on the
amendment,
main
so the
motion.
amendment passes unanimously.
Yes.
And now the second vote is for the
Motion.
amended motion, which also passes unanimously.
Yes.
So for the record, we're clear.
We good, Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have item number 12. Item number 12 is to discuss, this is something that we have discussed in the past, but to discuss and take appropriate action on the recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Woodcreek addressing building across lot lines and on multiple lots be allowed if and only if there's unified ownership, same ownership of adjacent lots. And if there is only one primary structure, single-family residential home, presently existing on one and only one of the adjacent lots with unified ownership. This is the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, I need to clarify something on this.
Yeah,
because
please,
the-
this is
The motion was made
clear.
to go ahead and accept this. There was an alter, then, Commissioner Paul made an amendment to the original motion to strike number 2 in the document presented in the packet. So basically, what the council was seeing, what the amendment was. After the amendment vote was held, it passed, which is allow building of fences across it. But they skipped going into the main motion.
So this is,
I move that we send
Let's
this
move.
item back to P and Z for review again, and that we have a brief discussion and potentially make some edits to the document and make some clarifications that they asked for.
okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
If I may. So what I read is there's the original document and then there's the crossout. And based on that, the basic question is about the goal. Is the goal to only allow fences, sidewalks, and landscaping to cross adjoining and adjacent property? Or is the goal to allow citizens to use of their entire adjoining property as one single family residence without the expense of having to replat their adjoining or adjacent properties? So those are two different goals. The original goal seems to be written, when I read the original document without the strike throws, is much more like I can have a shed on my adjoining property. With the crossouts, it's not saying that at all. It's saying no sheds, but it's only saying fences and sidewalks and landscaping. If we go, I read into some, sort of the code, so I guess the basic question is it only fences Or do we want to address a shed on the side property? If we do, it's much more complicated because it touches a lot of different sections of our code. But I'm going to leave that up to. So I have the list of codes in front of me, but I won't go into it if we're simply going to say we're only going to focus on that. But if we do decide we're going to have a bigger discussion, I have lots of codes.
Mayor, the P and Z recognized their error today of not voting on the main motion, and they requested to come back to them.
Oh, so we should
Okay.
have
Yeah.
discussion?
No, I think we should still keep going and send them something useful because, sorry, I'm going to speak now, but I listened to their meeting, the whole thing, and what I gathered specifically on why they struck number 2 was, and they had excellent discussion on it. The primary concern they had was you have this whole list of non-permanent structures and then you throw in pool house, which is sometimes almost a residential building. In fact, typically it's used as a guest house as well because there'll be a shower and a bathroom and people, throw a futon in there, say goodnight. But so they almost got to the point of saying strike pool house and that's it. And so I think we should consider that. The other point that they brought up that I thought was very relevant was that none of this addresses a minimum square foot size. So somebody could essentially put in a shed, build a house inside of it and just say it's a shed. So I think we establish a minimum square foot build for any accessory structure in that statement. That should cover that. Consider striking pool house. On number 3, I like that, and I think it should come back because we want to make sure we're preserving our building setback requirements.
Yeah.
And I do still have the concern over the interior lot line, but the idea is if these are removable accessory structures, if the person wants to chop that piece of land off, those structures in theory would need to come down. And
Piggyback on your statement. In our code, when we talk about setbacks, we do have one for the interior
right.
setback.
Yeah.
So there's that whole, in my, that one, 7.5 feet on one side, 7.5 feet on the other.
So
Basically, nothing can be built there based on our code. Nothing can be built in that 15 feet. So
right.
that would be a setback, unless P&Z or council wishes to change that wording specifically, but that's what it really.
So I think we should consider leaving those setback lines alone because there is no guarantee that somebody will tear down their accessory structure in selling. And then there's no guarantee that in the sale, an inspector catches that and says, whoa, you've got a red flag. And then you come up with the issue of now somebody's got a lot and they're trying to put in a fence, or now they've built into utility easement lines that are supposed to be there. So I think on number 3, I would suggest we rechange the wording there to include the interior setback lines in any design plans. I think that's reasonable and relevant and ensures that future purchasers are able to keep all structures in case they don't get torn down.
If I may, I'm going to make the other side of that argument, which is I have a house. I am butted up against the 7.5 foot that easement on the side of the house. Now, I own the property next to it as well. And I'm going to fence it all in and I consider it my side yard.
Yeah.
Now, I want stairs that come down the side of my house to access. Now I have to build stairs in that easement. What do I do?
So
I'm just saying there's arguments there.
This applies to accessory structures. And so maybe we would need to write in, because fences is its own thing and it covers sidewalks. So you could potentially consider stairs a sidewalk. And this number 2 is about accessory structures and it lists them out. So I think those are 2 different things. You make a valid point, but I think it's covered.
So then I'm going to continue with that theory of I own these 2 lots next to each other and I consider them as mine, but there happens to be a line there. I want to add a bedroom.
No. Then you
So
need to
then
replat.
we need to go replat.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to make sure
Councilmember.
that the argument's clear.
Yeah, and that's important because you're not going to tear down a bedroom to sell the other lot.
Yes, Councilmember Pulley,
Yeah, can we make these changes tonight instead of having to send it back to P and Z? I mean, this is their recommendation. Don't we have the right to say, we're gonna look at that recommendation, but here's the changes we're gonna make to the
yes,
ordinance?
we do.
Be a recommendation of changes, because actually.
No, I'm not
we can
saying-
Go ahead and say.
Yeah. Now that we've taken their version in consideration, can we make the changes tonight and get this done, or do we? Okay, because,
We can,
I mean,
we
my
can
thinking
make
is
the
this is, the thought was
Yeah.
basically to address the fence issue. If we're getting into structures and all that kind of stuff, I'd rather stay out of that because it sounded like it's very complicated. But if we can make changes tonight, then let's try to do it and get it done. But if we can't, we got to get more
Yeah.
advice from P and Z, then okay. But it just seemed like it's been hanging around a long time and we ought to try to figure this out.
this,
So it still has to be put into ordinance format, which would still need to be approved and would still likely need to be sent back to P and Z for,
But what I would recommend is go ahead and instruct staff to have the ordinance draft for the next meeting. That includes what their recommendation is on fences, or whatever. Whatever. Then have them address everything later. Again, this is what have structure. Go ahead and get it out of the way about the fences, because that's what we're trying to address.
Yeah, that's what I would like to do. So you're saying go ahead and have staff draw up an ordinance and that goes to P and Z or comes back to us?
no.
Okay.
So what,
Because
it's-
this is under the.
You-
Not under the,
Okay.
So
Do we have a motion yet or can we move
Yes,
like
we
that?
have a motion.
okay,
can we pause? I need you to re-explain what you just proposed because you're saying now
Yeah.
we're going to break this into two things and we're going to submit two different ordinances, which cost us $250 a piece, right? At least.
well, what I'm suggesting is that go ahead and draft an ordinance that addresses this. And get that on the books. Go ahead and do that. I'm not even go back and draft anything else.
Yeah, I don't feel any urgency to deal with, building across lot lines, internal lot lines right now. We're trying to deal with the fence issue. If we can get an ordinance drafted, we can look at it next time, make adjustments and get it done.
And this has nothing to do with this thing, but in December of 2015, January 26th, it was presented to the city council to adopt an ordinance with one-year law, where it was easier for people to use their laws. But then the council. And I wasn't here, I have no idea why, but there are several cities that do that. And one of the biggest questions was that is that in fact eight counties ability also to see what's going on. And but the point was just basically also the city, all the county.
Right, we're not talking about that right now, though.
I
We're
know,
not-
but
yeah.
that's another option that we have to look at it.
Yeah, that sounds like a can of worms I don't want to get into. I mean, if we're trying to deal with a simple issue of fences across internal lot lines, I can't imagine. I mean, I'd rather get something put together and let's take a look at it next time and get her finished.
Well, the problem with what you're saying is even if we use this, it still addresses building across lot lines because it says fences, sidewalks, and similar related hardscape and landscaping may be built across lot lines and cross over. So it would be an entire new ordinance. And I don't remember Mayor Rasco's full presentation or discussion on this, but I believe that it was beyond just fences was why this was being brought forth.
yes,
And that the members of our public who were wanting to be able to use all their lots as a unanimous lot, it wasn't just about
Yeah,
fences.
I don't know if we want to get into that. I'm saying right now we have a simple problem. We're trying to do a simple solution with regard to fences, and we ought to be able to do that. I'm not prepared to get into, can you build over 3 lot lines if you want to? That seems extremely complex. It's going to involve maybe the county, planning issues and whatnot. So I'm just saying, let's try to figure out a way to fix the fence issue. And then later on, if the other issue comes up, we'll deal with it.
Building across a lot line, multiple lots, so regardless of what you're building, and the sidewalk on the building should be addressed in the
It should
section
be.
of our
I don't really understand the issues with the county and the plating, because if you're not putting a primary structure, you're putting only removable things, you're building under a certain square footage, and you're maintaining your interior lot lines, and you have a reduced impervious coverage here on number 5, all of that should be well within county concerns. I mean, what areas of the code were you concerned about, Grummer? Councilmember Grummer, sorry.
Well, currently, 156.025 zoning district conformity. Currently, you can't have a shed on a single-family residence without a primary structure. So we have to change that particular zoning, or that particular code, 156.25, because it specifically says you cannot build on. So again, if I have my house primary structure one land, and I have open space property next to it, and I want to put a shed over there, I can't without changing.
Are you sure these two can't work together?
Sorry, what?
Are you sure that this ordinance doesn't work alongside that one? Like, we don't want to change prohibiting people
Shall I-
just putting a shed on a lot, but does this ordinance, if passed, work alongside that one? Meaning like, okay, but if you happen to own both of these lots,
Can I read them? Shall I read it?
Number 2. It is taking out the primary. Here, where it is in the other one.
Yeah.
And they so it was in conjunction with our.
This is
right, so if we reinstate 2, strike pool house, clarify a maximum square footage, I keep saying minimum, my apologies, maximum square footage.
But it should be in alignment with that.
And with the suggestion that city manager made with this, you could bring back to our meeting, a staff could work on a draft ordinance that would take into consideration what has just been listed, because I will say, I have 2 lots. We joined them before before you had to sell your firstborn to pay for the fees at the county. So many years ago. But that's where I have my vegetable garden. I have that second lot. So now I have this big lot next to me. I cannot put a small greenhouse. I cannot. I think this is too limiting. I think we've gone backwards with, so I agree with comments. I agree with Councilmember Hines and Councilmember Brisendine. And I would like for us to, as long as we're doing something to help the citizens, do something that's
So something else you could
a
add
little bit
in.
more, I don't know, a little bit more expensive.
I know I've exceeded my comments on this, but something else you can add in on this as far as defining what a temporary structure is, you shall not lay a concrete base. So many cities define temporary structure as something sitting on blocks. So that might, I haven't looked at the above code, but temporary structure might already be defined. But if not, we could redefine it here as sitting on blocks or pier and beam, essentially. Yeah, and because the concrete slab would make it so. All right, so to potentially move forward with this and have it put into ordinance form, I move that we reinstate number 2, that we strike pool house on number 2. I'm just on number 2. I'm gonna do it real slow, okay? So we've reinstated number 2. We're going to strike pool house. We're going to.
You should strike carports because we don't allow them.
Oh, yep. Sorry, that was the other comment here. I missed it. We're going to strike carports. And we're going to define temporary structure to mean pier and beam or on blocks, no concrete slab. And a minimum square footage of what seems reasonable? 600 square feet?
Maximum or?
I keep saying minimum, maximum. My apologies. Maximum square footage. What seems reasonable? Because obviously 1,000 square feet is basically a house. So we need to go down from there. Our garage spaces, 2 parking spots is 10 by 20. So that's 20 by 20, 400. So 400 square feet max, I think is huge.
Are you saying total for the side yard or one structure?
A single structure cannot be, and then we're going to reinstate the impervious coverage. So they still can't. So we're going to reinstate number 5 as well. And then on number 3, we would like to add building setback requirements will apply to all lot lines.
So we could, technically, I could on my mythical side yard, build 3 400 square foot buildings.
No, because you have to, impervious coverage would still apply. Now, if you had a giant lot,
Well, yeah.
then yes, but
That's right.
depending on the lot size,
But
it'd
generic,
be over because you have to. 10%.
That's right. Okay, so,
so well, that's the maximum, yes.
that's the maximum,
'Cause I
600
was like,
square feet,
might-
not
I
the
might
minimum.
wanna
the
greenhouse-
maximum.
600 or 400?
400.
Okay, I took a lot of notes.
Okay, so we have 2 motions now.
So let me make sure that I understand. We're going to reinstate number 2.
So are we
That
done?
that
Let's
includes
finish-
defining temporary structure. It would be a single structure with a maximum square footage of 600 square feet. We're
400.
striking full house,
400.
400 square feet, square footage of maximum of 400 square feet. We're striking full house and carports.
On
Airbnb.
the ground, on ground or on blocks, no concrete slab.
I think I got it. And then we're going to leave number 3. and we'll-
Reinstate it.
Will
Change it.
apply to all lots lines and reinstate number 5.
Now, I have a quick question. What does number 4 mean? I can't make sense of that. Standard impervious cover limits shall apply to the lot on which the primary structure exists.
So where my house is?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Too much help. So where in my mythical little statement,
Sure.
where I have my yard and then my side yard which has nothing on it. Where my house is 30% impervious cover. The side yard, which has that line, that would be 15%. So what this is saying is it's not changing my primary residence.
Okay.
You cannot come back and say, I want to build a deck on my primary deck now that I have 2 lots.
Now that I have all this extra space, I can't calculate it.
Okay.
I don't have the 15% as,
Half.
Half. Half, so it would be 15.
okay,
Number
I
5.
see.
So is that,
There's a typo on number 4. It says lot
Yeah.
1. Should say on.
If we're doing typos.
to the lot on which, yes. Okay, that's,
The typo,
And
last
then-
sentence, there are 2, quantity, 2, TO, after the word improvements.
okay. So the plan would be you would bring this draft back to that council meeting.
We have 2 motions.
We have 2 motions, so we need to clarify, we need to clean this up. What was the first motion?
The first motion was to, where am I? The motion was to send this item back to P and Z for clarification.
Well, we have changed that,
No,
so.
no,
but
But we never voted on that.
It was to send back to P and Z with edits clarifying for their to discuss and send back to us.
And then the second motion was to go ahead and have staff draw up the ordinance with our recommendations.
All right. So motion, first motion, we had a motion and a second. We now have a second motion that we need to,
She's gonna read the second motion
Read
because we
the
need to
second
vote on that
motion,
one
please.
first.
So to reinstate number 2, to strike pool house and carport from number 2, to define temporary structure as pier and beam or on ground, not on concrete slab, maximum accessory structure as 400 feet, reinstate number 5, reinstate number 3, and add building setback requirements.
Did we say square feet?
I said, did I not?
And it's building setback requirements for all lot lines.
Okay, we didn't get a second for that.
So it was my motion. So is there a second?
I'll second. Did you second? Okay.
Who's gonna second the second?
We need to vote on the first motion.
First one first or the second?
We're going on the
We're
first,
gonna-
we vote it down, then we vote on the second.
This is- Okay. We need to vote on the first motion.
Okay.
Vote no.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Nay.
Councilmember Pulley,
No.
Councilmember Grummer,
Nay.
Councilmember Hines,
No.
Councilmember Brizendine.
Motion fails. Now, please read the second motion.
To reinstate, on the ordinance to reinstate number 2, strike pool house and carport from number 2, define temporary structure as pier and beam or on ground, not concrete slab, maximum accessory structure as 400 square feet, reinstate number 5, reinstate number 3, and add building setback requirements for all lot lines.
Okay?
I'm gonna have one more moment of discussion. I did hear in the beginning of that motion that we're sending it to staff to make the ordinance. There was no direction to this. It was just changing words.
No.
I'd like to amend my motion to state that we're going to send this to staff to draft the ordinance.
Draft the ordinance.
Second.
So we want to make sure the motion includes that.
Okay, so now we'll vote on the amendment.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine, Councilmember Grummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley.
Aye.
Okay, and now we got to vote on the motion.
Now we vote, okay?
Okay, Councilmember Pulley,
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Grummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine, Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Being that this is the last meeting on our agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I was going to say dismiss, to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.